All right, we're live with Lloyd Legacy Sharp. Lloyd, thanks for coming aboard tonight. I appreciate it. I know I reached out to you like a week ago, short notice, but I appreciate you making some time in your schedule.
Thanks for having me.
Not that there's
It's
a
an
lot
honor
going on, but
to.
I appreciate it coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So you were telling me that you've been doing comedy for 4 years now.
hmm
What were you doing before that you started doing comedy, and what made you want to get into it?
Well, it's weird because, like, my first time at a comedy venue, I guess you would say, was I went to the Winter Circle in Salisbury to watch a friend of mine named Jay DeMule, who is, in my opinion, one of the best local comics, like ever, like on this level. And but I had met them before, like we were just friends. You know, I met them while I was in New Hampshire, and like I went to watch them and Dave Radigan, who runs the open mic there.
Yep.
I'm in the crowd and I'm enjoying comedy just as a fan, and I really lose myself as a fan. I will laugh my ass off at anything I find funny, and Dave Radigan came over to me after the mic was over and said, "Hey, kid, you got a lot of energy. You want to go up next week?" I'm like, "No, I'm just here to see Jay. I just don't want to go up." "Are you sure you don't want to go up? You can go up next week." I'm like, "No, that's not why I'm here." "Well, we signed you up. You're up next week." "What?" And that's how I got into comedy.
Oh, that's great.
I was literally a fan who was given a chance and went with it.
How many minutes was your first set? Do you remember?
So the Winter Circle's 5 minutes usually, unless you have somebody like Justin McKinney or Mike McDonald who are more than earn their right to go as long as they want. But like for people at my level, those 5 minutes.
Okay.
And so that was my first set, 5 minutes.
Do you remember like the first joke that you had ever wrote before? Like what it was?
To be honest, like because I was going into it as just somebody who was just told to do it and doing it. Like
Right.
a lot of people before they do it, like they know they have some idea of how they're gonna go about it or some idea of writing or type this, type whatever. I literally would just went up there, and so I got a bunch of stuff that I said on Twitter the last 3 or 4 years, and I just tried to get stuff like that and compile them into like a list. And I don't remember the first thing I said, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't funny.
Yeah, I'm trying to think the first time. Well, you know what's so funny is let's see, my first time ever doing comedy, I think was 2003. Well, Twitter didn't exist back then. So I just remember going to like an open mic, and all my friends came with me, and I just told like inside jokes that only my friends would get. And then I remember afterwards, like, the person who was like the head of it was like teaching me. She's like, it was a woman, I forgot her name, but she said, you got to tell the jokes that people are going to get, like not just your friends. Don't use the F word every other word, because I was so nervous. I had no idea what was happening.
I don't remember if it was my first joke, but I do know that one of the original jokes that I actually told that night, I've worked into my act to this day, because you listen to me, I sound white, but I look like this. So like I felt like, and I'm in Salisbury, so you're getting close to that area where whether they laugh at it for the right or wrong reason, they'll laugh at it.
Right.
So I know in that set I drew attention to the fact that I sounded like them but looked like this. And I kind of played off that for like maybe I didn't know what I was doing. So like when I saw something that worked, I kind of clung to it, and I kind of played off that for about 3 minutes. And that night I think was the origin for jokes that I tell today. Like, I look black enough to get away with anything I want, but I sound white enough to make you listen. Or things like, I look like somebody who celebrates Black History Month, but I sound like somebody who can't. Like those are like openers, but like I think the genesis for those things were like from that first night.
Okay. Do you have anyone that you looked up to when you were, when you were growing up that you liked, comedians at all, or?
It's weird because like I grew up in a very conservative Christian household, and I grew up to have neither one of those two values ideologically. But I would say that like okay, here's the thing. When I was younger and I didn't know what I know now, I was really big into Bill Cosby. I mean,
You know, you
obviously,
gotta be able to, I think you have to be able to separate the art from the artist, right? Don't you think?
I mean, especially like as a person who grew up on him,
Right.
like I don't really agree. I obviously nobody should really condone what he did off stage, but it would just be delusional to say that the work he did on stage as a child that I didn't find it hilarious. And between him, Steve Martin, Robin Williams, those are the guys I kind of like grew up on. As I got older and I was allowed to be and listen to more, explicit guys, Richard Pryor,
Yep.
Eddie Murphy, in the more modern era, maybe like Mitch Hedberg, Lewis Black. Lewis Black's actually one of my favorites. Dimitri Martin.
Oh yeah, I love Dimitri Martin.
I think he's one of the more like overlooked. Him and what's the other guy? The guy that his name always escapes me, but he had a great joke about don't know when to say the YouTube phrase, like that guy. Just his name escapes me, but just people who aren't always talked about, but I just like who make me laugh, even if they won't make everybody else laugh. Those are kind of the people that I grew up admiring.
Well, you know what I love about what's funny about the Bill Cosby thing is, so I have two kids, 5 and 7. My 5-year-old, because I grew up in the 80s, so
right.
I loved Fat Albert. So my 5-year-old has been watching Fat Albert because I bought him the whole season. And
right.
He was on a Zoom a few weeks ago with his preschool class, and he's asking if anyone's ever watched Fat Albert before.
Oh God.
And I just think about what these parents are thinking when my son's asking if they've ever watched Fat Albert.
Right. And it's weird because, like, again, I for a lot of reasons, personal reasons, I deeply disagree with Bill Cosby's personal decisions, and it's sometimes it's even hard to look back on some of the things he did, knowing what he was doing behind the scenes.
Right.
But back when I was a child and didn't know any better, I can't sit here and tell anybody I didn't laugh at Bill Cosby, because I did. And most of the comedy exposure I had due to my parents' strict nature was him. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I think it is interesting when you have someone that you grew up idolizing, or someone that right, and then you find out that they're not maybe the person that you thought they were. Like, obviously, I was a huge Michael Jackson fan. I don't know, no one knows exactly what happened, but
right.
I'm still gonna tell you what, Thriller comes on, or Billie Jean comes on, I'm still gonna turn it up. I'm not gonna turn it off. I mean,
that's fair. I mean, I can't lie to you. I and this is actually something that's very known about me. I actually happened to do up in New Hampshire a Michael Jackson impersonation gimmick.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
And it's been an attraction up there since 2017. So, like, even though sometimes I have, second or third thoughts, if it entertains people, I have fun, they have fun, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. So what is the gist of your set now? The type of humor that you do. Are you making fun of, yourself? Or you make fun of the crowd? Are you talking about social issues? What are you mainly talking about?
If I had to describe my act now, because I think I mentioned it before, like before we went live, that like I've been doing this for 4 years. I've only been good for about 2. And it was 2018 where I kind of found my voice. Like they always say, you got to find your voice, find a way to translate you to the stage. And it took me longer to do that because, again, I was literally just pulled out of the seats and told to do it, as opposed to somebody who was building and grooming themselves to do it and then just finally did it. So you have like in 2016 and 17, I had a lot of, older veterans, this is how you do it, kid. And, they were kind of telling me how to, and my natural voice wasn't really coming out. So I did a lot of like slow punchline-less storytelling, and that wasn't really working. In 2018, I've always been afraid to let my full personality come out because I thought it might be too much. But when I started going with it in 2018, it worked. So I would say my writing style is, to sum it up without going too long, they are all things that I've either experienced or things that I believe in to a certain extent, just with commentary in the forms of punchlines and setups.
Okay.
And like, so they range from like experiences I've been through to observations that I would make through my own eyes, or something that if it's something that just happened, you know, they're basically anything under the sun that could be there, but just through my own perception rather than me trying to be somebody else. I would just do it as I would see it or as I would explain it. And it's helped me stand out if I'm listening to outside reviews. Like, I'm not the best comedian, obviously, but what I've heard from a lot of my peers is nobody out there sounds like Lloyd. And I'll take that.
Well, you know, one of the things that I heard a few years ago, which has always stuck with me, is that in order to be a good comedian, you don't have to be funny, right? Which doesn't make sense, but
right. I've heard that theory too.
You just have to be you have to be interesting.
Right.
You don't have to be funny. You just have to be interesting. And there's a lot of comedians that I see that I don't find funny at all, but I'll listen to them because I like either the way they talk or what the story is, you know, whatever it is.
Right.
But I do think if you can be unique, especially in the scene where there's a low barrier to entry, anyone can be, you know, you go to an open mic, there's 55 comedians that are waiting to go on.
Right, exactly.
So when you can stand out, I mean, I think that's great. I like that you use 3 names.
Thank you.
I don't know if there's other comedians that have 3. I don't think so. I was thinking about that today.
They're out there.
Like David Allen Greer, maybe, is like the only one I can think of.
Andrew Dice Clay.
Okay, all right.
They want to count him, but and that's the thing, because like Legacy is actually a name that I've actually had since 2003. I was doing music around that time, and I wanted a name that would like stick out, but I also wanted a name that meant something, so that if it caught on and it followed me, even if I wasn't doing music anymore, it would still like mean something. So I adopted it as an acronym: Love Ever Growing as Contempt Yields.
Oh, okay.
Which is a lot of like which is a lot based on my own personal like lifestyle and how I do things. But people started calling me Legacy, like in the 2000s. Like even people I knew, they was like, "Hey, Legacy, what up, Legacy?" So it's like, so it just stuck, and here it is.
What kind of music were you doing?
I was doing hip hop, but I was doing a alternative kind of hip hop. Like, my mother had just passed away in 2003. And I was looking for an outlet to deal with it that wasn't this or this. So I chose music, but I said, if I'm going to do music, I don't want to sound like all the other rappers. So I was doing like anti-drug message and like anti-street crime and things like that. And it was well received, and I was an independent artist. So like I could do whatever I want because I wasn't signed. But because I wasn't doing what was popular in the era of G-Unit and Crunk, by 2008, I kind of realized that it wasn't really going to work out. And I got offered a contract that I turned down for, let's just say, industry reasons.
Okay.
And I haven't done anything since then.
Are we roughly the same age? I'm 42.
34.
Okay.
So,
all right. So you grew up a little bit after me. Yeah. See, I was a huge hip hop fan in the 80s. Like, I actually had this argument with, I forgot who I was arguing with about this. I think it might have been Don Zolo maybe, or somebody had posted something about who's a better hip hop artist, and it was like the Beastie Boys or Eminem. And my argument was that Eminem isn't hip hop. He's rap, and there's a difference.
Yeah, that is like, especially in the old school mentality, that is true. I can agree with that.
Because it's more of like a culture thing. Like I grew up with like the first Run DMC Raising Hell, which is to me the greatest rap, hip hop album of all time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that came out in 85. My aunt took me to the mall to go see LL Cool J perform when he was like 17 or something like that.
Wow.
In Bridgeport, Connecticut.
Nice.
I mean, but
that's definitely the origins. Like, I mean, I grew up on people like Rakim and KRS-One and Biggie and Tupac later on. But like, there is a divide between hip hop and rap, especially as time went on. Like, rap became commercial and hip hop was the actual art. Like, that became a thing in the 2000s, like where more people were taking hip hop and making it catchy, and or rap and making it catchy. Whereas hip hop was, you're listening, but it also makes you feel, and it also makes you think. It doesn't just make you tap your head and nod and stomp your feet. So I agree. There's a difference there.
Do you is there anyone that you like now that you listen to at all, or are you just
in hip hop? Oh my God. I'll be honest, like since the mid 2010s, I've largely tuned out of the hip hop. Not because there's nobody good out there, but just like when you grow up in the era that we grew up in, and you have people like Run DMC, people like Rakim to compare this to, like nothing. I was spoiled. Like nothing I've heard in the last 5 or 6 years really stack up. I guess I like people. I like Kendrick Lamar. Like I kind of like him, but he to me is a lot like B.O.B. Like they were really, really solid and really, really like taking this somewhere different or back to where it used to be. And then the next album they had, they were just like they sold out, if you will. I think people like Cardi B is really talented, but I look at Cardi B the same way I look at Lil Wayne and Nicki Minaj. They're both talented, but they focus on sounding good better than being good.
Right.
Because I've heard Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne do their underground, and they actually are really good. Like Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne are really good, but mainstream Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne are not as good as underground Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne. And that's where I see Cardi B.
Right.
So, I mean,
I'll tell you what, you are right though. And I remember being in 8th grade and someone bringing in the NWA tape, like it was, like a cassette tape. And we were listening to it on the playground, and like can't believing what we're hearing, but it was awesome because it was new. And I don't know, maybe because I'm, old man yelling at the clouds that I'm like, oh, the stuff today is terrible. But
no, you're right. And that's the thing. Cause like people who just grew up in the last 20 years, they have nothing like that to compare it to. Right. I look at it like almost like the Boston Garden versus the TD Garden, Like if you've only grown up in the era of the TD Garden and you don't know anything about the Boston Garden, then the TD Garden has the most history-laden thing you ever saw, nothing to compare it to. But if you grew up and you've been around long enough, you know that what's around now isn't what it was then. Same with hip hop. Like if all you grew up with was Drake and Nicki Minaj and Lil Wayne, and you did not grow up on Rakim and LL Cool J and NWA, then of course they're going to be the greatest thing ever. What else you got to compare it to?
Right. Yeah, and I wonder if comedy is kind of the same way, because when you grew up in the late 70s, 80s, early 90s, people were still able to do groundbreaking stuff that you really haven't heard before. When Jerry Seinfeld had his stuff, his observational stuff that no one had heard before. Richard Pryor had his act that no one had heard before. Eddie Murphy. And people don't really. Eddie Murphy was 21 when he did. I think he was 21 when he did Raw. Like, could you imagine putting out something like that when you're 21 years old with no life experience whatsoever?
And to this day, that is still one of, if not his most fondly remembered, like stand-up recording.
Oh, absolutely. But that's one of the problems with today with comedy. There's obviously a lot of challenges, but trying to do something that hasn't been done before is hard, I think.
And I think that's indicative of like, and again, I've only been doing this 4 years. Like for example, like Steve Sweeney, who I actually first corresponded with during a Zoom call a few weeks ago, is trying to bring me into a program of his so he can put me in an audience with, more established bookers. But this is a guy who has forgotten more about this industry than I'll ever have a chance to learn. And he sits there and tells me, on the phone like 2 weeks ago, he said, you introduced me to a whole new world of comedy. And I'm like, you've been around this business for so long. What have I done that you've not seen? But I think that goes back to people being, like you said, interesting or unique. Because I think the only reason why people who have been into what I've done isn't maybe so much because it's not something that hasn't been done, but like because I'm only speaking on things that I've been through or only things that I have an opinion on to a degree, and because I'm just basically accentuating from within rather than trying to I want to say like trying to be or trying to capture or capture the essence of anyone else. I think that resonates because Rick Jenkins, who runs the comedy studio, says, I see people trying to be Dane Cook. I seen people trying to be this guy. I seen people trying to be that guy. Like, he's been around a while too. And if you're trying to be someone else, it's going to show.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's hard though. It is hard though, right? Because you're most likely going to copy the person that you like.
Right.
Like Jerry Seinfeld was my favorite comedian ever. And that was kind of how I tried writing originally. And then once I realized that I'm never going to be Jerry Seinfeld, I kind of changed it up a little bit. And even now, like if I do go back to doing it, I'm going to pretty much just be a storyteller where I'm telling personal stories, and hopefully people think they're either A, interesting or B, funny. One of the two. So,
hell, Bill Cosby was pretty much a storyteller, and he made that work. But to your point about reinventing the wheel, I don't think there's anything we can done that hasn't been done. I guess the only thing you could do is do it and make it as much your own as possible, which the more successful comics I've seen live in the local community have definitely done.
Now, do you think because of, obviously everything has been done before, that people get themselves in trouble by trying to be too, shocking?
Like shock comedy, edgy, like, I mean, in my experience and just in what I've seen like live, I've definitely seen people who go up there and say something for the sake of getting a reaction rather than getting a laugh. Like, women, am I right? Like that whole thing where, but I think there are people who do that, but I've also seen people who are willing to take a risk of being edgy, but also trying to craft something creative around it. And I think that I've seen it, I've seen people go up there and just say something that's completely outlandish, not a joke, just something outlandish and off color, and they're just waiting to get a reaction. And there's something for that, but it has to be funny. It can't just make me go, oh, if I want to do that, I'll go to a rap battle.
Right. Yeah, true. Well, but you know what? Because 3 years ago, which will bring us to the next thing I want to talk about, was I had an idea it was probably 2016 or after Trump won the election. I thought to myself, man, if anyone ever came up with like a comedy tour that was catered towards like, conservatives living in the country, they would probably make a lot of money because no one's doing that type of comedy.
That's true.
Everybody was back doing the comedy that was, the mainstream stuff, which is all the liberal type of comedy. But there was really no one doing that. But then I thought to myself, like, well, if you did that, you'd have to be successful, because if it didn't work, then your career might be over.
Right. And it would obviously be catered to like a certain audience.
Right.
But they're the ones who will be with you. Like, I'm a centrist myself, so no political like comedy offends me really. But if you're going to choose a side to that angle, you would definitely probably only be able to do it in front of that crowd in those rooms. And
oh, absolutely. Yeah, you'd have to book shows in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma.
Right. Or the very top of Maine.
Yeah.
Like Westboro.
Now, do you so you don't do political humor at all? I
do, but I don't hinge on it. Like every now and then I'll make an observation. It's hard for me to do political humor as a centrist because I'm able to look at both sides of the spectrum and usually give credit or call foul regardless of how I feel about the person. But you never know who in the audience feels a certain way about whoever. So I never really go after like figures or names, because even I don't care enough to be offended when I hear a name. So I'm not going to like go out of my way to piss people off. But I will address things like the social climate or censorship, things that toe a political line without necessarily going directly for, if you like this person, you're dumb. Like I just.
Oh, those are my favorite Facebook posts.
Right, exactly. And I feel like you get enough of those on Facebook that when you go to a comedy show, you're probably, you're going to hear it, but it's just like, I don't know if that I couldn't, but I just choose not to. Like, I'll address political, social issues, but I don't care enough about political figures to build up or tear them down for comedy. Just not me.
Right. Yeah. See, I kind of miss that because I loved watching Leno and Letterman with their one-liners,
Mm-hmm.
and they would be able to do them about whoever the sitting president was. Right. That was like a
Exactly.
thing. And then
Lewis
I don't
Black.
know. I don't know
Lewis
what
Black made a career off of like tearing down whoever was in office, whether it was Bush, whether it was Obama, whether it was anybody. Like he made a
right.
career off that.
Well, Saturday Night Live. I mean, they had everyone, and they always had someone that could impersonate the president. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what year. I don't know what year it was when that became like you just weren't allowed to do that anymore.
I mean,
I
to
blame
me, I
social
don't think
media.
there's anything I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but I do know that I mean I've been in front of rooms where if you say the wrong thing with the wrong name in front of it, the crowd will instantly turn on you.
Oh, right.
And like some crowds are there to be offended instead of laughing. And if you say the wrong thing, even if it's a good joke, if they hear the wrong name in front of that otherwise good insult, they'll turn on you. And sometimes it's not worth the risk.
Yeah, and doesn't that makes me not want to do comedy? Seriously, that's one of the reasons because I don't like the whole cancel culture.
Right.
I think people should be open with what their feelings are, so that I know people who I want to associate with and
Mm-hmm.
people who I don't want to associate with. Right, as
It's a lot
opposed to
easier.
everyone having to be politically correct. I don't know. What are your feelings on that?
I mean, I said in a tweet a couple of weeks ago or a couple of years ago, like I don't care about being politically correct because politics themselves aren't correct.
Right.
So like, and especially if you're at a comedy show, like I get it. Trust me, I have heard more unfunny dick jokes in the last 4 years than I want to hear for the rest of my life. So I'm
Yeah.
not saying that every single comedian is going to try something and it's going to like work, but if somebody says something that is legitimately creative and funny, and it just happens to take a dig at somebody that you don't like personally, and you can't laugh it off for what it is, whether it be a political leader, whether it be a celebrity, whether it be whatever, whether it be left or right middle, if you can't take a joke and laugh it off for what it is at a comedy show, why are you there?
Yeah.
And
I agree.
I feel like there are certain things that no matter how funny you try to make them, maybe you, for whatever personal reasons, experiences, maybe it's just not for you. Like I've often said, like George Carlin, I'm a huge George Carlin fan. There are certain things he said that I didn't laugh at, but if we're in the garden and I'm the only person out of 14,000 people not laughing, it's not the joke that's not funny. I'm just not laughing at it.
Right.
So if there's a personal experience like trauma, whatever that you don't laugh, okay, fine. But if you can't laugh at somebody being made fun of that you'll probably never meet just because you have an admiration for them politically or socially in the media, that's too much.
No, I agree, man.
I can understand not laughing at a sexual abuse joke or something like that if it's something that hits you personally. I think there are funny ones out there. I've heard it be done, but if that's you personally too close, I get that. But if you can't laugh at a joke being made about Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama or George Bush just because you like them too much to hear it, then don't come to a comedy show.
I know. I think it's literally insane. Some of the stuff that I see people getting upset about. Like, for instance, let's just say which I am, like a huge, Bo Jackson's my favorite athlete of all time. If someone told a joke about Bo Jackson, I'd laugh because if it was funny, I'd laugh, right? But if someone were to say the same joke about Hillary or Trump or Biden or Bernie or whatever, people would take that personally. And it's
right.
So risky.
Exactly.
Like, they don't know who you are. They don't care about you. For the most
exactly.
Right? They don't know who you are, and they don't care about you. That's my whole thing about politics in general is I feel like whoever you're rooting for really doesn't know who you are, and they don't care about you.
Exactly. And for all the reasons you love them, if you knew more about them, you probably wouldn't. So if you hear somebody make fun of them at a comedy show, that's the last thing you should take offense to.
Have you ever not written a joke because you were nervous about the way that it would be received?
I don't know if I've ever not written a joke based off that, but I do know that there are certain jokes that I probably haven't told in certain rooms.
Okay.
Based on how it might be received. And more so because, like, I get that, cancel culture, not a thing, but if you're in a room where they'll at least be mostly receptive of you, if you're doing well, then sometimes trying to egg them on for the sake of getting a joke out there isn't worth it. Like, I may not tell the same jokes in Salisbury that I would tell in New Hampshire, or I might not tell the same jokes in Somerville that I would tell in Connecticut. And some jokes I've told in certain rooms have worked, but not the same in a different room. And as I've gained experience, I'm like, okay, so this crowd likes this kind of stuff. That crowd likes that kind of stuff. I've never not written it, but I do choose where I tell them.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I've worked clubs, all over, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Florida.
It's awesome.
It's interesting. It's funny because sometimes you have to do the joke towards the crowd, like you said. Mm-hmm. And I remember doing a joke in I was in Philly at the Laugh House. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Okay.
Never been there, but I've definitely heard.
All right, so it's a predominantly black audience, and I was happened to be in Philly for something, and so I called up and like, hey, any chance I can get like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and they said, yeah, sure. I go, well, I'm going to be coming with a lot of people, so I had like 15 people with me, so literally, it was my 15 friends, all white, and they were the only white people in the audience.
Oh, so God.
It was, you figure like 400 black people, 15 white people sitting up front. So I just had to call out the elephant in the room. I got up there and I said, I did it. I brought all the white people. And you know what? It got a huge laugh, a huge ovation.
Nice.
And it, broke down, it let me just have a great set. And
that's awesome.
But sometimes you have to call those things out.
Exactly.
I don't know if I would do that joke today, but maybe, I don't know, but this was like 2010 when people were allowed to make jokes. So,
well, that's good because like
I ever played at.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, there's a place called Slade's here in Boston, which is usually have you ever I'm assuming like you've probably done like shows there, right?
I've eaten there, but I haven't done shows.
Gotcha. Well, I mean, like pointing out that's like, first of all, just again, respect for your freaking journey and your travels. Like that's freaking amazing. But contrastly, I'm usually playing in front of a mostly white audience,
right?
In my experience. Which is why, like, I'll usually, like, again, I sound like you, but I look like me. So, like, which, like, normally when I'm doing a show in front of a mostly audience like that, I usually just get that out of the way up front. Some variation of, yeah.
That's great.
Like some variation of, like, because I've been told all my life, you don't sound black or this and this. And it's like that kind of stuff. It's weird when you're younger, but when you get older, you can embrace it. So like Kathy Ferris, who's a just goddess in Boston comedy, she actually told me to use the line, I look black enough to get away with it, but I sound white enough to make you listen.
Right.
She recommended that as a closer. And I usually do that whenever I'm talking about something that may seem off color. But like, sometimes when you're in front of an audience like that, and like they hear you, they hear me, they know that I don't sound like what is expected, and it may not even be, and they're not necessarily prejudiced. It's just the way we're conditioned. So like when I go out there and I say, let's face it, I'm the whitest sounding person in New Hampshire right now. And everybody starts laughing. And then I say, while being darker than Kurt Cobain's innermost thoughts. And they laugh at that. And I say, it's not racism, it's self-awareness.
Right.
So sometimes you just gotta call it out.
I mean, Chappelle's got that famous opening line that he does on the young comedian special that he did on HBO where he gets out. I think he's in Aspen, Colorado. Have you ever heard that set?
Mm-hmm.
When he gets out, he goes, Aspen, Colorado. Where are all the black people? I mean, right? I mean, you have to call it. You got to call it out as you go. And I'll tell you what, when you could be authentic, that's what makes it. That's what makes it funny.
Exactly.
You know,
I'll never forget one of the best introductions I ever got from Rick Jenkins at the Comedy Studio. He was telling the crowd, like, I gave him some pointers on his set last night, so let's see if it's any better. And then I came out and I said, that's what you do in 2019. Listen to what the white man tells you. And everybody lost it. Just like out of the way. Boom.
So were you when's the last show that you did before the quarantine?
The last show I did was a smaller show, but a great venue. It was I believe it was at the Asgard. I live in the South End, the Asgard in Cambridge, like right up the street. The Gutter Boys, Demetrius Hullum, Kenny Capozzi, Sean Sorrow. And it's funny, they actually gave me 2 more dates in that room based on how well I did that night. But
what month was that?
So that was in March.
Really? Man, when I heard about the coronavirus in February, I didn't leave my house until like 2 weeks ago.
Right. And so, like, actually, no, I stand corrected. It was at the end of February. I'm sorry, end of February. And I had a date lined up in March and April, but, obviously. But that's the last show I did was at the Asgard. And, like, it wasn't the biggest or brightest or, like the most, but it was a nice, intimate setting where people were there to hear the comedy.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it was a good crowd. It was a good set, and it was nice to have that to take with me before all this started.
So, if you could do a show next week, would you do one if it was indoors, or are you like, no, I'm not doing it? That's not yet.
I mean, I'm doing an open mic in Providence next week, so I'm very much open to doing shows. Probably not every single night right away, but I'm definitely open to doing things. Definitely.
That's really interesting. Okay. Yeah, I went to Target today and I'm like freaking out that I had to go there.
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah, maybe I hope it can come back and with full audiences.
Mm-hmm. I think it will. I think it's going to take time, and I think that much like anything else in life and anything else interacting is going to be a very slow process before we are able to do it the way we used to. I mean, when you see the host on stage, you're going to be doing this instead of shaking his hand. But I think it will. I just think it's going to be a slow process.
I'm glad about the shaking hands thing. I have like the worst. I have small hands. I have the worst handshake ever. So I'm like, man, maybe the coronavirus will be good for me. I don't have to shake hands with anybody anymore.
Oh, man.
So what is your I see you so I had you on because I saw you on Facebook probably arguing with somebody about something.
Yeah, it was
so what is your take on it, on the protests, everything going on right now? Where are you at? What is your thoughts?
My thoughts are pretty balanced on it because, and I think that's where I first saw you was on one of Trisha's posts, I think.
Yep.
And like, it's weird because we were already as a nation exhausted by the pandemic.
Yep.
And then this happened. So like, I feel like we were already not really, like, I was actually texting a friend of mine a few minutes before this started. We were already not emotionally and mentally, just like we're not operating at a full tank. And then this happens. So like, I feel like a lot of people were very emotional. I'm a believer in using logic over emotion because logic will lead you straight, whereas emotion, while it is what you feel, will betray you if you don't use it right. And my whole thing is that it's difficult because like I myself am not I don't go to protests partly because my father is afraid and he's an older guy, so I don't want to scare him. But like historically and I admire people who do it, but not because they shouldn't, but just because the people who should listen never do. It doesn't always seem like protests are heard the way they should be. And I feel like I respect people who do it, and protests right now have kind of shifted certain things, but like I do think there's a line between, I don't like lumping every single protester into the category of looters and rioters, because there are those, but not all of them are doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Same way I felt about, people who were, the whole cops thing. I myself, I can say this looking like this. I can say I don't believe every single cop in the world is the kind of cop that would kill George Floyd or Eric Garner. But I do believe that the existence of cops like that, the existence of good cops are not eliminating the problems that are caused by bad ones.
Right.
And I feel like it's important to definitely separate the two and focus on the issue within that allows things like this to happen continuously. And as hard as it is to do, I also think it's important to not paint everybody under a umbrella label. Like just in general in life, I don't think people should do that. But I said this a couple of weeks ago and I stand by it. I don't agree with the way everybody who is carrying out their frustrations with George Floyd have done it. But I definitely understand the frustration more than most people ever will.
Yeah.
Just like I said back when the lockdown protesters, when they were saying, we want haircuts or whatever. I don't necessarily think that we want an economic recession that's our grandkids are going to have to pay for it. It's going to make the post-Reagan era look like a boom period. So I get the frustration. I get why you're mad. I just don't think storming the state house with guns is the way to get it done.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's pretty much how I feel about what's going on now. I get it. Just don't agree with the action.
Okay.
In some regard. A peaceful protesters I dig, but leave the riots in LA, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I can understand, the looting, the rioting, because, I saw somebody on Twitter comparing the protesters to children throwing a tantrum. And my thought was, maybe that they're actually abused children who have grown up to be able to fight back.
Exactly.
It's kind of how I equate it. But, and it's interesting because I think I don't know if it was you or someone else that posted, the new silence is violence or whatever it is, right? If you're not
right, I've heard that. Yeah.
And what's tough is like I have a lot of friends who are cops, and I know them as my friends before I know them as cops. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I don't know them as being dickheads, but I do know that I've been pulled over like 7 times, and I don't think I've ever had a cop be like, "Hey, man, nice to see you today." Like they're always like mad at me because they pulled me over.
Right.
I'm the one that's about to get a $200 ticket,
Exactly.
I don't know why they're so mad. I need to find out why they're so mad, but
I think somebody in that post actually said it best. I think it was Nick Lavelle, I think, when he said, Trisha in that post, because like everybody was piling on her, and I said, to this day, I still don't have necessarily an issue with her. I think her issue was with me. But she was coming from a place of having family in the policing, field, who she knew were not like the people who killed George Floyd.
Right.
And I understood that, but then there were a bunch of people like Austin McLeod and people like Rashid Towns and people like, Kwasi Mensah, who were trying to explain to her, you're asking us a question. Here's our answer from our perspective. We're not trying to discount your perspective because we know where you're coming from, but just hear us. And it didn't seem like she was really doing that until Caitlin McPhee stepped in and said, "Listen, you motherfucker, listen to them. Stop being so freaking dense about it." And her and Rena Calm, and like eventually she did. But that one instance is just a scale of the wider problem. People think that I said it in the video a couple of weeks ago. When I talk about cops who are causing the problems, I'm not talking about the bad ones. I'm not talking about the good ones. I'm talking about the bad ones. So When I say cops are a problem, when I address the cops in the situation who are a problem, to say, to think or assume not all cops, no shit. It's like saying not all snakes are poisonous. That doesn't mean the ones that are can't hurt you.
Right. Yeah, I think the way that I'm going to give you the analogy, I feel like I wish I was spearheading the whole thing, first of all. Because we get stuff. I wouldn't target the small businesses because I think mom and pop shops need to survive. You want to go to Target HQ, Amazon HQ, totally with you, Yeah, but
they'll be fine.
Here's the way I look at it. I look at it as the cops are fruit salad, right? and the bad cops are grapefruit. If you put grapefruit in a fruit salad, it tastes like shit.
Yes.
That's how I look at it, because
Exactly.
it taints the whole thing. And I don't like the protesting, and it makes me mad. It makes me sad, but it doesn't make me sad and mad because they're protesting. It makes me sad and mad because they're protesting, and I wish that they didn't have to. I wish that it was a country where people were proud to stand up to the flag. And, I don't have that experience. And, I have a lot of friends, that do have that experience, and it makes me feel bad.
Exactly. Like one of my friends, whose name is Rob, he's a veteran. Like he served. Like he was in the military, and he actually chimed in on a post I put up a few days ago, because somebody, like, I put up a picture of Kaepernick and the cop who killed George Floyd, and the title was "Which knee bothers you more?" And I've always said, like, I do coexist with people who do not like Colin Kaepernick. But those same people are able to look at what the cop did and say, okay, I didn't like that, but that's obviously worse. And I know people who don't try to say that what Kaepernick did is either as bad or worse than murder. But one person on my page actually tried to call them equal. And my friend Rob, who served, who was a member of the military, that they love to say, yeah, the military fought for our rights and the military fought for our freedom. He was one of those people. And he said, as a veteran, what Kaepernick did not only didn't bother me as much as what this guy did, but it didn't bother me at all, because we fought for the right for people to have the freedom to express and protest peacefully. And that's from a veteran. The same people that the people who hate Kaepernick love to say fought for their rights. So I agree with you. It's great that we have the freedom to protest peacefully, but the fact that we have to is disheartening.
Yeah, I mean, I was one of those people that was mad at Kaepernick, because I just didn't know. I was probably ignorant to the problem. I mean, that's the reality. And I actually saw an interview the other day that Kaepernick gave that I had never seen before. And I was like, why didn't I see that? And I watch a ton of sports. I had never seen this interview that he gave. And I think it was in August. So it had to be after like a third preseason game.
Right.
And it just makes me wonder, sometimes I feel like the media just really wants to divide people.
Oh,
and they do a damn good job of doing it.
Absolutely. Like every media outlet you see, most of them will either embellish or omit based on what's in their ear. And like I said, I, as a person who myself continues to this day to stand for the anthem, because that's just something that I do based on my background, I have never looked down on anybody who didn't. But sometimes it takes something worse happening to make you realize maybe that wasn't so bad. Because that probably was the worst knee anybody ever saw taken, until the knee that killed George Floyd. Right. So it's like, all right, you want to be mad about Kaepernick, whatever, but which one's worse?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting time, and I do think that the pandemic was the perfect storm, because everyone was home to see it. And I do wonder if the pandemic didn't happen, would the reaction have been the same? People going about their lives, more stuff to watch, sport,
I mean, to be honest, like I said earlier, I think that if the pandemic didn't happen, a lot of things would be different. Because I feel like dealing with the pandemic and dealing with the guidelines and dealing with everything that we were already like trying to adapt to, on top of it, that was already draining us. Like, not only may we not have seen it, but even if we did, we may have been in a better, less erratic state to react to it the way we would if we were all at 100% within. Just my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think success looks like for this current movement? That's what I mean. I've always wondered that. Like, what is success? Like, what is the end goal?
I mean, it's weird because you've heard the phrase like in a perfect world, and I actually said this to my father the other day, like, because we're all optimistic, like maybe this will teach us something, maybe we'll learn something. And I said to my father, like, we didn't learn from Vietnam, we didn't learn from the Cold War, We didn't learn from the Gulf War. We didn't learn from 9/11. We didn't learn from the Boston bombings, which took place like 10 minutes away from where I live. We didn't learn. We don't learn from things the way we should, and which makes the question, what is success, even harder to answer, because I feel like what success would be reform police protocol, where less disproportionate focus on excessive force towards Black people, which is what started all this. Like I say it every morning. I'm like, whether you like what's happened so far or not, if that cop did not put his knee in that guy's back, this wouldn't be happening. So you can feel whatever you want about the result, but if that guy didn't do that, this wouldn't be happening. And it's just a larger domino effect. Breonna Taylor, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, and just a laundry list. So I feel like success would be not allowing that to happen at the rate it's been happening, or more consequence and higher accountability whenever it does happen. Because the fact that it happens pisses people off. The fact that the people responsible for it pisses people off. And until one or two of those things are adjusted, if not just flat out completely overhauled, I don't know what success looks like either.
Yeah, I'm probably going to have to, I probably disagree a little bit with you on that, only because I don't know if it happens more to Black people or white people. I don't know. I think that the numbers are almost the same, but I do think that it happens in poor neighborhoods more than other. And I think income inequality is the first step to solving the other problem, in my eyes. I mean,
that's another one.
What do you think?
I mean, what I can say about the income inequality is another thing that, I mean, that gets into economics, and that is definitely something that I don't know where economics is going to go from here after like all the lockdown and stuff. The numbers by the state of excessive force towards Black people, if I've just gone off research I've done, they are somewhat the same in certain states. They are higher, and I didn't believe this. I had to fact check this like 5 times, like over the last 3 weeks, but I would say that income inequality might play a role, but I think that's more of an economic issue that determines where people are and what district they're in and what brand of police they might be around, which could play a factor into that. But
they're not policing in the rich neighborhoods.
Exactly, exactly, and depending on where you can afford to live, you may or may not be subjected to excessive force and things like that. But as long as the cops that are causing the problems are either in the system or just allowed to get away with it the way they have been over time, the problem itself, I think, isn't going to go away. How to go about that is complicated, but as far as the problem itself, that's what it looks like.
Have you seen the Daniel Shaver video?
Yeah.
You know that one? Oh, you have?
Yes.
The white guy in Arizona?
Yeah.
Where he was executed in the hallway?
Yeah, and that, oh man.
Did you hear about what happened with that cop?
That I did not hear about.
Oh, well, he got it. Okay, well, let's see. Of all the murders that have taken place in the last, or police killings, I shouldn't say murders because I'm sure some of them are justified. In the last 30, 40 years or whatever, I think I read that less than 0.5% have been convicted.
That's true.
Okay, so the Daniel Shaver one, I think the cop's name was like Philip something. He got acquitted. He got fired, and then he got rehired so he could collect his pension.
I never knew that part. I never knew what happened to the wow.
That's why I'll tell you what, I've been like telling people, like friends of mine, I'm like, this was a white cop killing a white guy. Now the news, it really wasn't even on the news because it doesn't fit how they want to divide people, which I believe.
Exactly.
But the fact that they acquitted that cop, that if I was a betting man, I don't think any of the cops in Minneapolis are going to go to jail.
Sadly, I don't believe so either. The cop that killed George Floyd was just released a couple of hours ago on bond.
What?
And like, yeah, it was just it was breaking news like
Wait,
earlier
I
this
don't think it
afternoon.
was him. It was not the one with not Siobhan.
Well, the other three got acquitted of aiding and abetting, but there was a
Okay.
breaking news article that I saw, like the bond, like the guy that actually killed him,
Yeah.
according to the article, was released on like not like acquitted, but released on like on bail or
Really?
bond or something like that. And
Wow.
which, that's common. But you're right, because until cops that do that kind of thing, maybe you can't stop them from doing it, but if you hold them accountable, if you make the consequences for a cop that commits murder the same consequence that it would be for anybody else that committed murder, or at least at the very least not allowed to be a cop anymore, I think that would curb the outrage, because that's justice. You can't bring the person back, but you can at least get them justice. And
Right.
usually, whether it's the family, whether it's the nation, whether it's both, you can't bring the person back, but they want justice.
Right. Yeah. See,
And I
I
think
think
higher police accountability will go a long way towards that.
so. Right. So if that cop, let's just say the cop goes to jail, right?
Right.
Who cares? I mean, it doesn't solve anything. It
It
puts
does.
it puts a band-aid on on a boo-boo, whatever, and who cares? But the bigger
Exactly.
problem that I think is, I really believe that it's probably like 80%, a media-driven problem, because what do they show on the news? What do they show? They show black people getting in trouble, killing cops, and the cops killing black people.
Mm-hmm.
They meet in the they meet in the street. They hardly
Mm-hmm.
ever show a cop beating up a white guy, right?
Right. And that does happen. Let's face it, that
And
does happen.
so when they
I know some white boys who hate police even more than I do for that reason.
right, so when they meet in a situation, there's probably tension there that
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't have to be there, because they've
Right.
now. I don't know if you ever read the book The Four Agreements. I just finished reading this, and what it's
Heard of it.
about.
I've heard about it. Never read it,
So
actually.
what it's about is how your beliefs aren't really your beliefs, right? So like they say, like if you were abused by your parents, that you can't really blame your parents, because your parents had their belief system was drilled into them by years and years of other people's belief systems, right? So
Right.
it's like we don't really believe what we think we believe.
And that is true to an extent. I believe that there are a lot of people who are willing to settle with whatever they've been hardwired to believe.
Right.
That is one of the reasons why I have always encouraged the prospect of looking deeper and thinking for yourself, because there are a lot of things that I grew up believing, and a lot of things I was taught were the way,
Yep.
that I have grown to find are not the way. And I feel like you should only go with what you are taught and what you are told if there's foundation beyond just the source you heard it from that makes it valid. And like I say it all the time, like I said, I'm as a centrist, I have been giving shit to both sides of the plane for years, and as a agnostic, I am not just going. I don't just follow things that automatically go to God or automatically go to science. But if there's something that has a foundation that can be factually proven to be valid, even if it's not necessarily something that I want to believe, even if it's not something that I was necessarily raised to believe, even if it's coming out of the mouth of somebody that I don't like, calling a spade and thinking for yourself and only going with what you hear if there's validation to back it up is so crucial when navigating the modern day media and mainstream and online and stuff, because a lot of what you hear that you want to hear isn't exactly what's true. And what you don't want to hear might be worth taking a look at, because you'll be better for it in the long run. But there's a lot of people that rather feel correct than be educated.
Right.
And that's not helping.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I mean, honestly, I was probably one of those people where I was like, well, I don't think these people are racist, because that's just who I am. Like I grew up, listening to hip hop, and
Right.
I'm a huge sports fan, and I have a lot of
Mm-hmm.
friends that are all different ethnicities, and it's never really dawned on me that people actually would target someone or they don't like somebody based on what they look like. Um,
Right.
but now I'll tell you what, the George Floyd thing has definitely changed my opinion on a lot of things that, I was, when the Michael Brown thing happened, shamefully enough, embarrassingly, I was probably like, maybe the cop was right. Maybe and now that I see the George Floyd, man, how many other ones that weren't filmed, you know,
Mm-hmm.
didn't have to happen.
Exactly. I remember the Mike Brown thing. Like Mike Brown was one of the ones that I was actually someone else spoken about. I said, I definitely think that that kid needed to be taken in for questioning and brought to some form of consequence for what he did, but I don't think he needed to be killed for it.
Right.
And that's the thing. Like we're not necessarily saying that these people who brought the police's attention to them were 100% innocent every time, but did they have to die?
Right.
And that's the question. Like I said earlier today, I said in the Facebook post, because there are people that are like saying, should George Floyd not have been arrested for possible forgery? No, he should have been arrested. But if that's all that happened to him, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Right.
And that's the problem. Bring to consequence, don't kill unless they give you a reason to.
Yeah, no, absolutely, definitely. Yeah, I hope that there's a solution. I mean, I truly believe that, I've been a big proponent of equal income for people, because I can't stand, big business where you have companies
Right.
that like Amazon that are putting little companies out of business,
A
and they're,
monopolization almost.
yeah, because you need more. If more small businesses were thriving in, different communities where you could have, warehouses, or that people could actually have a good job. I know you made a dig at post Reagan economy, but in 1985, a man could work 36 weeks and take care of his family.
This is true.
Right. And
It was
now,
definitely a
now in
different world back then.
2020, you have to work 54 weeks, and there's only
That's
52 weeks
true.
in the year.
That's
So,
true.
you know, I hope that we can get back to that time where both parents don't need to work, and that people can, work a job and not have to, worry about where their next meal is coming from, not have to work
Mm-hmm.
80 hours a week, and that, because there's enough money right now for everyone to have a piece of it.
Exactly. They burn money every day.
I mean,
Some of that could go somewhere.
so I do want to get you out of here. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but what do you think about these companies that are like hashtagging Black Lives Matter, right? And I'll tell you what, I've researched almost every single one of them on their executive boards to see like if they're all white people.
Right.
So they're good at tweeting it, but I don't think that they really believe it.
No, like I said, I can't speak to every single business owner in the world. Maybe there are your handful that genuinely feel that way, but it's like, it's the same as when Pride Month comes around, when Black History Month comes around.
Right.
It's to me, and again, I'm never the person to assume anything, but I do follow patterns. And to me, it's just it's holiday capitalization in tragic form, where they will come out and they will promote the flavor of the move, the flavor of the season, the flavor of the time, and they will say the right things, but they won't do it without trying to sell you something by the end of it.
Right.
And it's business, so you can't get away from it. Do I think it's in bad taste? Do I think it's kind of disturbing? Do I think it's a little bit fucked? Absolutely. But do I expect anything less? Not really, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I've been seeing people on LinkedIn that are like, show the receipts. We want to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't talk about it, and then you have 8% of your company, is minorities. Like, talk about it.
Exactly.
Be real.
Like I've always said that I'd rather have a honest enemy than a dishonest ally, because at least I know what I'm getting.
Yeah,
And like,
absolutely. I do not. I'm not a fan of the. I don't like the pandering. I wish people would
no.
just be truthful. And I had a friend of mine the other day that was like, she goes, he's a black friend of mine, and he goes, I want to segregate the country. He goes, he goes, he goes, just let us have a black America and a white America. And I go, well, can we like choose which one we get to live in? Like, you know, because he's like, I'm so sick of this shit.
Oh my God.
Well, like,
I mean,
why do these companies have to ruin everything? You know,
I mean, it's one of those things that it's like death and taxes. Like you don't like the fact that they're a reality, but you accept that they're reality.
yeah. But here's the thing, though, they don't have to be. All these protesters, right, that are out there. I want them to stop spending your money with Amazon. Stop buying Nikes. Stop buying Reebok. Buy locally owned. Spend your money at locally owned places. Prop them up. And
that's true.
Because you know what a company does when they want to raise their prices for their shareholders, they lay off 5,000 people, and they ruin 5,000 families' lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right, just so that they could raise their stock price a couple of dollars, so their shareholders are happy. Which I think it's disgusting.
Oh, and,
yeah. I would love to see a day when there's no such thing as a corporation and the stock market doesn't exist.
That would be nice. And I know that it's hard. It would be hard to gather everybody.
I'm a capitalist. I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative. I'm a capitalist. But I believe in like really real capitalism where it's like I buy pizzas for $3, I sell them for 10.
Right.
And if I mismanage my money, no one gives me more to mismanage it again. Like I have to go out of business.
Which is fair.
Right. Which doesn't. But
and
if you're
I feel like
bank that
in a perfect world where nobody buys anything, they would feel it. But you're right. Getting everybody to not do that would be the hard part.
I think it can be done. And we have there's 98% of the people that probably agree with me.
Oh yeah, I do too. I feel like, but getting them to not do it, like that would be the challenge. You would think, right?
Yeah, I guess that would be the challenge. But I look at a world where I used to live in Dorchester, right? So let's you too?
That's where I grew up. Yep.
Oh, okay, nice. Yeah. So let's pretend that there was a small business, and they could even be a big small business where they put a warehouse or a plant, manufacturing plant in Dorchester somewhere, and the people that are working there are making $50,000-$60,000 a year, right? Now you're making a good living, and you don't have to worry about your job, and you don't have to resort to because let's be honest, most people that resort to crime do it out of necessity. They're not doing it as a hobby. I don't know anybody that's
in places like that where money was hard to come by. That's true.
Yeah, no one's like, oh, you know what I love doing? I like collecting baseball cards, playing golf, and robbing cars. Like, no, it's not like one of your hobbies. You do it because it's a necessity, right? So if you were able to build these businesses in other places, and let the community grow from there, and it leads to more people starting their own businesses, which can buy from other small businesses. I'm not saying create a barter system, but there's no reason that there's not enough money to spread around to everybody.
No, I think that's a great idea, to have like a small business kind of mecca in every like smaller area, like every neighborhood.
Right.
Like it's one of those perfect world scenarios where it's like, I feel like that's a great idea. I feel like it can be done, and I feel like it probably should be done, but it's like the road to get there.
I'm sure it's tough. Yeah. I mean, I wish I had the fun,
But it's not the idea that's bad. It's just, and the system needs a lot of getting the fuck off of its ass and thinking clearly for that to happen, I think. But the idea is great. Like that is like when I was living in Dorchester, I would have loved that. I would have loved to have something like that there.
I mean, there's no we have enough automation in our country right now in the world.
Oh yeah. Look at what we're doing right now. Technology.
I'll tell you what. I was a huge Andrew Yang fan.
Mm-hmm.
He wanted the UBI, the Universal Basic Income, where because these companies are making so much money because they have machines that can do the job of human beings. And there's enough money out there that's not even being taxed where you probably could get $2,000 a month or a week or whatever to not do anything, to not go to work if you don't want to. And if you do
Exactly.
want to go to work and you want to make, $15 an hour or whatever, now you got a little extra money and you might be able to do something. But I don't know. I feel like we live in a world where some people have too much and some people don't have enough. And it could be even
Exactly.
out a little bit.
And it's one of those things that are like, I've often said people like Andrew Yang, people who have these broad, really, really good ideas that are good on paper, but it's just the system is so fucked within that it would take a long time to get to a place where that would be not feasible, but where enough people would just get out of the way and let it happen. I don't even think that's a bad idea. I just think there are too many people who don't have the kind of open mind that you have and have the vision and see the benefits that you see, and they would just obstruct without realizing, hey, maybe this would make it easier on us too if we just get out of the way and let it happen.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's so funny because the book, The Four Agreements, that I'm like obsessed with this book because everything in it
sounds like a great book.
Is literally true. It's like, well, the four agreements are, let's see, don't take things personally. Always do your best. Don't make assumptions. And the fourth one's escaping me. But it's basically like
it's good three. It's a good three to start.
People, you probably hear people that are like, I don't want them getting money for something that they didn't do. Like, why should someone get money? I'm working every day. Why should he? And people only want to hurt you when they hurt themselves, right? That's
exactly.
That's why people hurt others.
Like if they had that deal, they'd probably take it and wouldn't care who else had it.
Right. And I just think the world would be a better place if more people were happy, and people who are struggling aren't really happy.
True.
So
what do they say? Hurt people hurt people.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. Hurt people hurt people. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, it seems like it'd be good for everybody, right? Then everyone would get what they want.
I agree.
And
sometimes I feel like people hear something like that they hear how it sounds without thinking it through, and they automatically reject it. But if they actually think it through, like you obviously had, and the respect to you for doing that, if they actually thought it through and rationalized it, they'd realize, yeah, maybe it sounds weird, but in execution, it could be better in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of friends, especially living in Mass, that are like, "How could you be a Republican? How are you conservative?" I go, "Well, just because I'm a Republican doesn't mean I'm going to vote Republican 100% of the time. Plus, maybe I want to change the party. Maybe I want to change the ideals. Like, I don't think you need to make $1 billion.
Exactly.
I think you can make like 40 million and live a good life. I think. I mean,
no, you're right.
You know what? I'll try to take 40 million and see how I feel.
Right. Exactly. Like you mentioned the 80s. Back in the 80s, and I say this all the time. Like the Republican Party wasn't always exactly what it is right now on the problematic side. Back in the 80s, the Republican Party was still kind of in its moderate leaning phase. Ronald Reagan, who I'm honest, like Ronald Reagan, even though I called him on his faults too,
yeah.
Ronald Reagan is my favorite president in my lifetime. And I give him a lot of flack in hindsight because there are things that I feel like, but as far as presidents go, and he was a Republican, and he did a lot of things that economically were not exactly the Republican way, but definitely made the 80s what you described it as being earlier, a very financially forgiving and affordable period of time that we have not experienced since. And that was under a Republican regime.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I don't know. I guess people they're too tied into their ideals, and that's one of the biggest problems, right? Is that people don't want to communicate. They don't want to have a discussion, and I think it definitely comes from both sides, right? If somebody has an opinion that they don't agree with, they're just going to shout you down, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I have like I guess the big thing now is the Confederate flag, right? That's like the big thing going on,
right?
Yeah, I think it's terrible, and it stands for losers because they lost, right? So,
right.
But I like the Dukes of Hazzard, and here's the thing: like when I watch the Dukes of Hazzard in the General Lee, like I don't think of I just think of the X on top of the car,
right?
And I don't think that we need to be erasing stuff from history,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, what do you think? You'd have a better opinion than I would.
I mean, I look at the Confederate flag the same way I look at the American flag, in that it's a piece of cloth, and I've never been really that invested in it. Like, I I get that it's something that means a lot of things to a lot of people, but in my opinion, I don't think it should mean so much that whether they keep it up or take it down, you won't be able to get on with your life. Like, there are things I'd rather have removed in this country other than the Confederate flag, like bag hops, for example. But like, if I had to pick between one of the two things to be removed, I'd pick, problematic police. But
Well, they should
I
remove it if
understand.
they lost. I mean, they lost, or they should
Right,
lower it,
exactly.
They should
So,
show
like,
that they lost. But I don't think it
exactly,
needs to
like,
be erased from history. It needs to be in a museum, I think.
mhm.
Um, but like today, I saw HBO took Gone with the Wind off of, like, you can't stream it on HBO anymore.
Oh
I go,
God.
what does that solve?
Right.
You know,
And I get it. Like, they don't. These are times where people who are a little bit more emotionally involved in certain things than you and I are may not react well to certain symbols and things like that.
right?
My opinion on the Confederate flag is I don't have a problem not seeing it. I didn't care when it was up before, because I just, again, there were just worse. Just like I don't fall over and have a heart attack whenever somebody says something bad about the American flag. I didn't lose my mind because of the Confederate flag. Like, I'm not a fan of it, but I didn't care. Like, I just, whatever.
Well, what? I have a fourth grade picture of me with wearing the Confederate flag, because I'm wearing a Dukes of Hazzard shirt, and the General Lee is like doing a summer, like a flip, and the Confederate flag is right there because it was on top of the General Lee, and I'm like, man, why would my parents make me wear that? But like, I've literally, I think if you're a child of the '80s and you look at the Confederate flag, the first thing you think of is the General Lee, in my opinion.
Right.
It has to be the Dukes of Hazzard, or else your childhood was terrible.
And that's the thing. Like, here's the reason why I like, again, like, and I here's the thing. I understand both. I've heard people who are for the flag. I've heard people who are against the flag. I get it. I myself didn't care enough. I just felt like if you are so invested in the flag that if they remove it, you are not going to know what to do with the rest of your years,
right,
then that's not a problem with the Confederate flag.
Yeah.
You need to pull back in your emotional investment in that piece of cloth, because if they take it down because they don't want reminders of that, again, whether I am invested in it that much or not, I'm not going to die because there's not a flag on the pole at the NASCAR race. Like, I'll be okay. Like, we will go on. And if it bothers you that much, I feel like you might need to reassess what you invest your emotions in.
Right.
Like, not seeing the need for it is one thing, but having a heart attack over it, that's something completely different.
The statues, I think, are interesting. I see people getting upset, and they're tearing down history. Like, well, they didn't bronze like the actual person. Like,
exactly.
It's like a $60 statue that they put up in like the 1950s or 1960s.
Exactly.
It's
Don't
not
worry.
even that old.
The history will be there. Even this. Trust me, I know the history will be there whether the statues or not.
Right. Yeah. Statues because that one doesn't bother me. I do care about the movies and like the art that kind of bothers me a little bit. But I can see,
I feel like there are certain things that they do that won't really help anything and won't really change anything. The movies is one of them.
I mean, what do you think about? I mean, do you think that they should be censoring? Like, they took Elmer Fudd's gun away.
God,
is that gonna stop gun violence?
I mean, here's the thing, because what I think is happening right now is the nation justifiably is at an emotional fever pitch.
Right.
Like, we may not be reacting, and again, I'm not the last. I'm the last person to sit here and say I don't get it, because I do. But I feel like if we weren't already exhausted by everything happening this year, we might not be as reactive to every single little thing, even if there's a good reason for it, that we are. So do I think that they would be taking Elmer Fudd's gun away if the nation itself wasn't at the emotional pitch that we are? Maybe not. Do I think it fixes anything? Maybe not. But if there's anything that they can do to help us calm down,
right,
for the sake of just who that might piss off, even if it's not me, even if it's not you, for the sake of somebody that might piss off, that might decide to go take it out on the mom and pop store, no matter how nonsensical it is, you know what? Do whatever you have to do to let us cool down, let tempers slow, and then once we are okay, give Elmer Fudd the gun back in 5 years. But just let us calm down now.
Yes, yeah. As a comedian, I'm not a fan of censorship.
I'm not either.
Like when I listen to Juicy in the car, you know, Biggie comes on the radio.
Yes.
And they have to like mute when he goes blow up like the World Trade. Well, he didn't blow up the World Trade, and he wrote the song before 9/11. So why are they
exactly?
I don't get that.
That was 93, not 2011.
I need people to tell me why they're doing that.
Well, that's the thing. Like, for me, I'm not a fan of censorship either. Like, I believe that whatever it was that was there, for better or worse. I mean, okay, certain things may not age well from the 30s and 40s and 50s. Like, I get that.
Right.
But normally, I'm not a fan of censorship because I feel like whatever it was, you know what, you may as well put it out there and let them own it. But the only reason why I can understand, I don't think necessarily that I do think it's being overdone in certain areas, but we are losing our minds. And I think that people in charge are just, they're throwing shit at the wall. Maybe this will calm them down. Maybe that'll calm them down. You know, take down the flag, take down the statue, take Elmer's guns, take Yosemite Sam's too. I think they're just trying to figure out some way to get us to calm down. And I don't think that it should be this level, like once this passes and once we're kind of like, you know, easing back to normal mind. But for the time period, I understand why they're panic censoring. They're just trying to get us to calm down, I think, to some degree.
It's interesting. Yeah, I sometimes I just wonder.
Any other time, I'd be like, you're overdoing it. Stop it. Knock it the fuck off. But given our state right now, it's like, okay, I get it.
Sometimes I think they just do it just to make people more mad, like because they know when they do it, half the people are gonna be mad about it, because some people didn't even know that it needed to be done, or that it was gonna be like no one even complained about it. Like, why are you doing that?
I mean, I'll be honest. I don't know what Elmer Fudd's gun never pissed me off. If anything,
it never killed anyone. He shot Bugs Bunny 5,000 times. He never died.
Exactly. And the beak spot from Daffy Duck, without Elmer Fudd's gun, that you don't get the beak spot. And I love the Daffy Duck beak spot. So, but like, again, there may be somebody out there who's not as, you know, who's not as settled as you and I are right now, that who knows, maybe they see Elmer Fudd's gun and like, oh my God, oppression. And for that guy or that woman or that person and thousands of like that person, again, doesn't make sense to me. No, but they might be out there. Who knows?
Right.
And maybe they're just, I don't get it, but you know what? I haven't watched Looney Tunes in 3 years, so you know what? Whatever. I won't even notice.
I'll tell you what. I just ordered all of them for my kids because the cartoons today are terrible.
Yeah.
At least to me. But I'll tell you what. Watching them as an adult, I'm like, wow, there was a lot of violence in these cartoons, man. They like try killing each other every day.
Mm-hmm. Popeye, Bluto.
Yeah. I mean, it is so funny, especially when, you know, now that I got two young kids and I'm looking at it through the eyes of what's supposed to be a responsible adult. I like I just ordered Speedy Gonzales, and there's like there's a scene where there's, you know, these two mice, and they go, what do you want to do today? He goes, go check out pretty girls. He goes, we can't check out pretty girls. Speedy Gonzales has all of them. The only thing left are the chihuahua. And I'm like, oh, maybe. And my wife is like, she goes, is this appropriate for kids? I'm like, I watched it when I was a kid. I guess it is.
Just went right over your head.
Oh yeah, they have no idea. You know.
I mean, like I said, you know what? I'm not a parent. I don't have kids, and I mean, you have 2 kids. You said that's more than I have and more than I want. But I will say that it might be funny if they look back in 10 years and notice the same things that you're noticing now.
Right.
So, it's appropriate now. It just, hindsight is the current year.
Yeah. Well, listen, Lloyd, thanks so much again for coming on tonight. Where can people find you if they want to check you out?
I am on Facebook at
TikTok.
I'm sorry.
Are you on any of the social medias besides Facebook?
Oh yeah. I am on Twitter and Instagram, both at Lloyd Legacy 617.
Okay.
And I'm on YouTube, but I haven't done anything with that yet, so I'm not even going to mention that here. But I can be found on Instagram. I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Facebook at Lloyd Legacy 617. Those are my only 3. That's enough.
Cool, well, I hope when things get back to normal, maybe you and I will be on the same show one night.
I would love to actually meet you and talk about some of this stuff in person. Thank you sincerely, Mr.
All right,
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks, buddy. Take care.
You as well.